I've just got one.
Look at that, strategically placed. I love it.
Hello, guys. I'm not sure if you just jumped into the call right now, but you're joining us for the property panel experts, or the property expert panel, whichever way you want it. It's that name. I'm joined by a group of fantastic people that is going to be here sharing their ideas, thoughts, and solutions for you tonight. Bronwyn Vernicum and myself discussed this group about creating a YouTube Live for landlords across the UK and globally to help them with their questions. And it's just fitting that we have obviously a major impact with regards to health and our wealth in the form of coronavirus. And no doubt there'll be a number of questions that you'll be having. So make sure, as you are listening to us tonight, that you type your questions into the comments box. But what I would rather do right now is pass you over now to everyone else, and I'll be the last one to introduce myself. So why don't we start with Bronwyn? Why don't we share your details?
Hello, everybody. It's great to be here, and I'm really excited about this event. My name's Bronwyn Vernicum. I'm a property investor down in sunny Hampshire. I'm also a coach and an author recently. So I've got my ear pretty close to the ground with what's happening out there, and so I'm looking forward to helping people with their questions today.
Great. Lynn.
Jenny, I think next.
Jenny, sorry, Lynn, Jenny. I'm reading question wrong. Jenny.
Hello, hi. I'm Jenny Mulholland, also from Hampshire, and I'm a letting agent. I've been in the business for 20 plus years, and it's a little trying right now, but really looking forward to fielding some of the questions that have been coming through and that we'll get tonight. One thing I would like to request is, if you feel you've had value from this evening, from the advice that's being given, our son he's 23 years old, just been diagnosed with cancer. And we've got a Just Giving page set up, and it goes to a young cancer cause. And we're trying to raise as much money as we can to help with this great cause. And what we're doing from solidarity point of view is Monty, our son, his 3 brothers, his father, and his 2 brother-in-laws are all shaving their heads on Saturday. We're hoping to get him some financial support and get this great cause some money to help with cancer research for particularly young people in this case. So thank you if you feel able to help with that.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you. Paul.
Evening, everybody. My name is Paul Hilliard. I'm the Operations Director for LMPG, the buying group for landlords, but I'm also a portfolio landlord and have been investing since 1992, say that quietly. I've got vanilla buy-to-lets, HMOs, service accommodation. I've got a couple of rent-to-rent just to test out how that works for people. And I'm here to answer as many questions as you guys can put forward to us. At LMPG, we do get a lot of questions on our Facebook group. So if you're desperate to get some products, please go on the Facebook group, and we try and update that on a regular basis to give you the latest on where our partners are supplying and how to obtain your goods. So feel free to make contact with us. Over to you.
Simon.
Right, hi everybody, good evening everybody. My name is Simon Hodgson. I am a finance specialist, mortgage broker, as well as property investor. I've been involved in property since the early noughties. I've learned how to lose it all through the credit crunch and how to rebuild it back up again. So this is kind of just another, if you like, upset or shock within the marketplace. And really, I think what I'd like to bring to the group and to help everybody is how I'm kind of, if you like, wired into where the market is at the moment, how the market's performing. Valuers, estate agents, lenders. You know, at the moment, lenders, it's almost changing on a even hourly basis during the day. Suddenly one lender will pull something, they then reinvent it, or they come back with a different loan to value. So really looking to better help field questions on those kind of scenarios, because we're all kind of stuck where we are. And I think I saw a surge of activity with remortgages over the last 2 to 3 weeks, where people were trying to get equity out ready for what is perceived to be a dip in the marketplace, so they can get back in and take advantage of it. It's me.
Great. I'm sure you'll be getting plenty of questions tonight, Simon. So make sure you have plenty of water by your side to make sure your throat does not get dry. Tim.
Oh, you're on mute, Tim.
I knew there'd be someone who got it wrong, and it was me.
You switch your camera off now.
Yeah, that's everything. I'm doing really well here, really well. You see, I'm totally and utterly in control. You now have faith in your solicitor. There you go. Right. So I shall start from the beginning again. Right. I'm Tim Bishop. I'm a solicitor. I have a law firm called Bunn Alec and Bishop. We've got about 65 staff, and we do a lot of work for property investors nationwide. I'm also an investor myself. I've done a commercial conversion. I've got SA, I've got an HMO, and I've got some single lets. So really, I'm here to try to answer any questions you've got about legal stuff. And if I can't answer it, I'll get one of my specialists to come back to you with the right answer. I think that's it.
Oh, Tim, you're on mute. Sorry, Simon, you're on mute now.
I've taken it off. I've taken it off. It's a delayed reaction there, Simon. I'm professional. I am professional.
You are.
So I'm Simon Misiewicz from Optimize Accountants, property tax specialist. So we're going to help you with regards to tax, but obviously at this moment in time, we are focusing very much on furlough and all the tax things that you might be able to benefit as well. As your host, you'll be seeing me looking down from occasionally because I'm the one who's going to be reading the questions and then fielding them out. It feels like it's who have I got news for you time. Hopefully there'll be a few smiles along the way. One of the first questions we've got is around about coronavirus, and obviously people saying to stay at home and don't move from your property. Now we're talking about HMOs, especially in this case, whereby people have been told not to leave or join into a property. So the question is, should people moving from a prop into a property, and what's the solutions around the table? So let's start with Jenny on this regard, because you're a letting agent. You're seeing a lot of these things moving on.
Jenny, you're on mute.
I shall manage the thing.
You're on mute, Jenny. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Yes, a letting agent, and we specialise in HMOs. So I'd like to tell you what we are doing. Obviously, the guidance is don't move unless you have to. And the only people that we are really getting any inquiries from are key workers who are moving so that they can actually do their job. And that feels right to want to help them. Now, if we've got an empty property that's not an HMO and it's empty, then we're doing video viewings and we will move somebody in. HMO is a completely different setup. We need to know very, very, very detailed information about why they're moving and about their health record. And so what we have been doing is, if a room is totally empty, we will video market that room. And before we actually meet the person, we want to know why they're moving. And there needs to be a good reason, not just, I just feel like it. Getting to the bottom of why they're moving during this process. If we then decide that it's a key worker and they need to be where we can help them, we will then send we'll do all the contract stuff, obviously, but we'll send a health questionnaire to the house and to that person, find out that everybody in the house is well before we will introduce somebody into the property. Obviously, if anybody is in lockdown because they are self-isolating, because they have symptoms or someone else in the house has symptoms, we will not move somebody in. But if the house is clean and the person moving in is also clean, then we will move them in, exercising social distancing and taking quite a few extra precautions, wearing gloves and so on when we're doing their check-in and showing them around the house. Ideally, we're not moving people in at this time, but if it's a key worker, we will do what we can to help them. And if anybody in the house has a problem, we will not move them in because it's not safe to do so. And that's what we have to consider. Does that fully answer the question?
Was there anyone else who's got any comments, by the way?
I think Jenny's covered that pretty well there, to be fair. I don't think I've got anything I would add to that.
Okay.
I was going to concur with everything Jenny said. I think it's important that you do have video journeys of your HMOs to show people. But likewise, I'm finding there's a resistance. Although people do love to help the nurses and key workers, they're very nervous about nurses coming into their properties. So it's unfortunate that if there's not total agreement, then unfortunately we have to suggest that nurse looks elsewhere. But that's it. You know, I think everything Jenny said. You know, take sensible precautions. You know, I'm finding there's not a lot of movements. The only things I'm finding is on service accommodation where people are wanting to move in because they want to be near their loved ones. So there's been a requirement for that. And I know there's a couple of landlords in Birmingham who are doing free accommodation for nurses in the city centre. So again, if there's nurses or key workers on this call, or you know such people who need local in Birmingham accommodation, then please contact us and I can pass your details on to the company doing that. It's nothing to do with LMPG or myself, but I spoke to him recently following some local radio news he made. So yeah, good luck everyone.
Bronwyn, obviously one of the conversations that you and I had last week when we did our own interview, you talked about it is at this period, coronavirus, and you come up with some brilliant ideas about local authorities and helping people change their strategy in regards to property. Do you want to share some of your insights from that conversation about
coronavirus? Just briefly. I have a few guest houses now. One of them was a Booking.com guest house. And what we've been able to do is to talk to the local authority and put the rooms over to homeless. Now, these are street homeless, so it's very specific category of person and it's not for everybody. And also the insurance is a different situation. So it isn't really applicable to a lot of people, but if you've got a large property with quite a few rooms and it's currently empty, then this is fantastic. You know, today I've been looking for 12 rooms, but the property can't have people already in it. It needs to be empty, and then we can use it for street homeless. So yeah, very specific type of tenant, but that's working very well so far. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much. And relating to all of this, obviously, there's a number of questions about mortgages. I did say I'd get you here, Simon, and here we are, double barrel. So the first question is, we're thinking about refinancing our property right now. Will coronavirus have an impact because of trying to remortgage? And we talked about that offline. And the second question, which is very much connected, is, well, what will I be able to get a buy-to-let mortgage in the near future? Are applications stalling because of COVID-19?
Okay, right, yeah, that's a really good. So in terms of if now is a good time to do a remortgage. If it's a single let, it's still quite possible to do. A lot of the lenders have agreed to do what's known as an AVM. That's an automated valuation method, or commonly known as a desktop. So they're using data to come in. They're not at the moment. There's no one really prepared to use that method for HMOs or multi-unit freehold blocks of flats. So they're a little bit different. But it is possible in some circumstances, if you've had or had conducted a RICS survey in the last few months, to be able to get some kind of retype on that evaluation report with the previous lender's consent. So that can definitely work. Is it the right time to do it? Well, yeah, you really need to get your skates on. I had one particular client came to me, where are we now? It was a week ago last Thursday. Which was a remortgage with capital raising, which I have to be honest, I was a little hesitant as to whether it was going to work or not. Went an offer out by Monday morning, 2 and a bit working days. And they used it, so they used the desktop val, all the details lined up and were correct. And really the idea for that lady was that she had been involved in a property meeting, realised she needed to act really quickly to get some cash out so that she was ready to take advantage of the market when it changed, because it is changing. And that's another thing we really need to cover tonight. Yeah, and she's taken nearly £50,000 out of a property that's only worth 200k. So it's a significant amount of capital raise. Lenders at the moment, it's almost a day by day or an hour by hour at the moment. So lenders will pull certain products, they'll replace them with a different product. The loan to values are changing a bit. So 75% is generally the accepted norm or max at the moment. Most of the lenders that were doing higher, if they haven't pulled the product, probably will pull it along the journey of the application. I'd be relatively confident. But yeah, 75 seems to be okay. A lot of them are knocking down to 65. So that's the first part of the question. Simon, the second part was, I've talked for so much on the first part, I've forgotten the second question.
Well, it's probably related to the kind of question that's pinged off from that conversation anyway. It is about buy-to-let mortgages. Do you think they're going to happen? I think you've already answered that.
Right, yeah.
But I guess then to connect to that with a question that's just come in is regards to the rates of buy-to-let mortgage interest. Will they go up or down?
That's a really great question. A lot of it depends on the type of bank that's lending you. Okay, so some banks securitize their loan book. Okay, and those lenders are literally falling by the wayside at the moment. So it's the lenders that have proper institutional money that are still lending into the market space because they are able to do so. They're doing with savers money. Those lenders are really liquid. They're really still very keen to get money out there. And although not all of them had reduced rates on the back of the Bank of England rate change last month, a lot of them are now sort of eyeing it up. And what tends to happen is that they all stand and look at each other to see who blinks first. Yeah, which is really common. But plus, of course, the other thing is a lot of them have shut down. They've almost shut down their lending arm for a period of 4 to 5 days while they dealt with what was a deluge of people ringing up for mortgage holidays, which I'll be honest, I was surprised at how many people were ringing up for mortgage holidays, to be honest. My genuine advice is, if you think you want to take a mortgage holiday, I would suggest that you try and make the payment or have made the payment for March and wait until the end of April so that those lenders' systems are up and running, they're tested, and you've got to see where the weaknesses are in those systems so that you don't fall foul of any, let's say, credit reporting to the credit reference agencies, because whilst they say they will report correctly, I guarantee errors will come in. No doubt about it. And the last thing you want to be doing as a borrower is trying to correct your credit profile whilst you watch the deal of a lifetime wandering down the road because your ducks aren't in a line. And don't forget, mortgage holiday is just that. What they're doing is they are putting the balance of the mortgage or the balance of the payments that you're missing onto the mortgage balance and then recalculating your interest moving forward on that higher balance. So that's effectively compounding in reverse, which is definitely not a great thing to do if you can help it. But I do understand that people's cash flows, in some circumstances, people have run their cash flows really, really tight. And at that point, if you run your cash flow tight, you have no option. Your back is against the wall. You need to take the help that's on offer. If you do that, absolutely make sure you find out who it is you speak to. Make sure that they've given you that they're recording the call, okay? Because not all lenders will record the call, and they can in certain circumstances. If they are not recording the call, they can move to record the call, and you can then ask them to define what it is that they are doing, what they're guaranteeing that they will do in terms of reporting, and take the name of the person you're speaking to, so that if something goes wrong, there is a phone call that's been recorded, and you have a person that you can then refer that back to. And lending is, whilst valuers aren't fully going out, the other thing I've seen, which has been really encouraging, it hasn't happened yet, but there is talk of potential drive-by type valuations happening where a valuer can't enter the property safely. And if you've had something like really detailed 3D images taken of, let's say, your newly finished HMO, there are lenders that are considering at the moment whether they can utilize those imagery. So you've got a drive-by valuation that looks at the outside of the building. You've got the internals covered by a really detailed video image. and potentially they can lend. So the lenders are really keen to carry on lending, even though they're all kind of standing back, kind of going, okay, well, we don't know where the market's going, how exactly it will react, because there has to be some kind of reaction in terms of prices and price correction-ish. But yeah, unlike the credit crunch, money is freely available and it's there. So I think there's a temporary dip in terms of lending, in terms of mainstream HMO buy-to-let lending, but it's going to come back in the coming weeks. And even if the lockdown continues, there's talk of sufficient PPE reaching valuers so that they can suit up, they can mask up, and even ventilating up so that they can go in and continue to do it. So the idea is to try and keep the market from dropping as much as possible. Because if it's left too long, I think we all kind of know where it's going to end up.
And that's a good point. There's a couple of points on this. Is the first one is drive-by. That really means something completely different from where I used to live. And the other side to that is going on to Tim. Obviously, we're talking about two sides of a coin here. So one is the mortgages, is the mortgage application want to go through, but for conveyancing solicitor, you still need to sign the paperwork. Are you finding any issues in regards to that side at all, or is everything going through as normal?
I think it's reasonably normal. Obviously, we're having to make some arrangements. I know sometimes some of my team, when they've needed stuff to be even witnessed, we've got to the stage of actually going and doing it through Windows, so stuff like that. So I think there are creative things you can do, and the vast majority of contracts don't have to be done in writing. Transfer of land obviously does, but the vast majority of contracts can be done electronically. So I think we're moving towards an easier system, and I think gradually that there will be changes that will stick.
We're all on mute, Simon. We tell him, Simon.
Simon, mute.
Oh, sorry, guys. I was going to say, everyone's laughing at me. I was thinking, why is that? Crap host, that's the start. So the first thing I would say is property prices, COVID-19. Where do we think we're all going to be in regards to house prices in the future? And let's start with ladies first. Let's with you, Bronwyn. Where do you think house prices are going to be?
Mute. Okay, so I've unmuted. Well, it's interesting because I've had this question asked of me probably 10 times in the last few days, and it's difficult to get a crystal ball out. I think, you know, I'm a positive person, and I hope that our government has got the right approach to this, and that we can start coming out the other side, you know, in weeks, maybe a few months, in which case there is a bit more certainty. And I think that's how markets react. You know, in property, it's not like stocks and shares, but you know, people need somewhere to live. So if you go back in January, February this year, look how the market has, the activity in the marketplace has gone up in property. And I hope that whilst that's obviously going to dip, that latent demand will continue post, you know, the crisis. But so in which case, I think prices will perhaps dip a little bit. People are a bit more committed and want to, you know, be a bit more motivated in terms of selling their properties. So I don't know, I think there's opportunity certainly for investors. Absolutely, there's opportunity there. You've just got to be very, very ready for that. You know, keep looking at Rightmove, look at what's happening in the marketplace, keep your ear close to the ground, talk to all of us, and be ready to move quickly when an opportunity arises.
Bron, we're just sticking with you for a second before we move over to Jenny. One of the questions that came from Richard was, it's midway through buying a property or converting a property, well, to buy a 2-bedroom house to convert it to a 3-bedroom HMO. Now, should he buy that given COVID-19, or should he hang fire? That's his question.
Well, I think on that particular question, and I know who this is, you know, they're adding value to that property. They're buying it in cash. And I think the issue here is that he wants to be able to refinance it to take his money out later. I think that's this particular question. But I think, you know, you've got to look at the numbers and say, you know, what you're paying for it, is that going to give you the sort of return that you want? You're going to add value to it. If property prices dip a little bit, you can wait. You know, as long as you're happy to leave your money in there for a little bit longer, if you're adding value anyway, you're going to get that. You're going to get that money out at some point. So yes, I would continue. You're halfway through. You know, I think if you pulled out, you'd lose an opportunity there for sure.
Okay. Let's move over to Jenny then. What's your thoughts about the price of properties going forwards after COVID-19?
Well, I kind of agree with Bronwyn in as much that I think there'll be a dip, but I don't think it'll be long-lived, because we're all still, we were just bouncing back from Brexit, and people have been on hold in the property market for the best part of 3 years. And the beginning of this year, we saw a lot of activity before COVID hit us. And those people had been waiting to move. Brexit got done, and then they started. The property market picked up. I believe that when this is over and done with, people will lick their wounds for a short while, and then they will need to move. And those people that have been waiting will get back into the marketplace, which will then drive prices again. So yeah, a small dip and an opportunity for investors, but I believe that the market will recover quite quickly because it's already been held up because of Brexit. And the point on the question about the gentleman who's buying this property that Bronwyn commented on, I think she's absolutely right. I don't know his circumstances entirely, but as long as his cost of finance isn't too high and he can stand to wait a little longer, I believe he'll get his value out of that property.
There is a question, Jenny, that's just come in, and I purposely wanted to cut myself off from answering the question. There was a question about holiday student accommodation. Now, this is obviously something it's going to have an effect, because universities have technically have stopped in many ways. Are we going to have issues with students not paying rent, and where does that leave landlords, in your opinion, before we move over to Paul about property prices?
Okay, so an awful lot of student accommodation is institutional, and they have got different resources, and a lot of them have cancelled the rents. I can only talk about the private rental student market. That's all I know about, and I believe that the people on this call are probably more interested in. In my opinion, those contracts stand, and those tenants should be paying their rent. They've gone home, most of them, not all of them, but most of them have gone home because they're not back at uni until September, but they signed a contract. And the landlord, most landlords in this country have a very small portfolio, maybe less than 5 properties as an average. And many of those landlords, it's either their main stream of income or it's topping up their pension, and they cannot afford not to have the rental on those properties. They will still have expenses against those properties. And I believe that it is morally the right thing to do for those contracts to be honoured. Now, that said, letting for next year is much more difficult. In the Southampton market, they let from the 1st of July for a year, whereas in the Portsmouth market, they will let from the 1st of September for a year. I do not believe Southampton will be able to let through the summer. When the contracts come to the end at the end of June, we won't see much activity until the students start coming back in September. So the landlords will have to, in my opinion, stand a rent void in the summer. It's a great opportunity to get in and do stuff to your property, actually, when no one's there. And often student properties could do with a good old renovation every year. But I think we'll have, I think the market for students will recover in September because they need somewhere to live. And the contracts right now, I believe the students should pay, even if they're not there. My opinion, I think it's morally right.
Okay, thank you ever so much for that. Let's move back over to Paul about property prices in regards to COVID-19. What's your thoughts in the future?
My personal thoughts are that, like everyone else here, is that there will be a dip. How deep and how long will depend a lot on what happens with the governments and how long we're closed down. I'm looking at it as an opportunity. So make sure that your credit files are all sorted and ready to roll, so you're ready to take advantage of the opportunities that are going to come. there are a lot of landlords who are going to get stung by tenants not paying. I've prepared and I've sent out 3 so far, long texts explaining to tenants who've asked and said, can I have a deferral or a rent holiday? And I've explained to them, there's no such thing as a holiday. That rent's got to be paid at some stage. Let me understand your circumstances and make sure that they fully understand that they've got a commitment. And like Jenny said, you know, it's my main income. So therefore I am looking for that, and the mortgage has got to be paid. And I totally agree with Simon. You know, if you it's a lender, it's a action of last resort to actually ask for a rent holiday, because despite what they say, it will be marked on your credit file, or at least in the files, you know, the Hunter reports that the lenders keep. So just be careful and make sure that, you know, it is a last resort. As regards prices, yeah, they will take off. I think it's going to, after the dip, it's going to be Q3, Q4 before you see a lot of movement in my feel. That's my gut feel. And I think next year is when prices may well normalise to where they are now. But it just depends on how long this continues for. You know, who knows how long. Unfortunately, we're going to be in this lockdown situation. So, but yeah, opportunities for those. If you've got the cash resources, then there's going to be a lot of opportunities there.
Good stuff. Simon, anything for you to add on that point?
Yeah, in terms of property prices, so I think I've kind of broadly aligned with the rest of the panel. Certainly echoing what Paul's just said, a lot really rests on how long the lockdown is going to go on, how widespread that lockdown is going to be. So if the lockdown will allow or make things like valuers key workers, which I believe should happen, so that they then get back out to the marketplace to keep the market moving on, that will then in effect limit how out of check the market gets, because the longer you leave the market, the more uncertainty it then breeds within the market, and uncertainty then creates certain things. And the last thing we saw within the credit crunch was all those people who didn't need to sell came out of the marketplace and just sat out and went, well, I'm not prepared to take a lower offer. And then what we were left with in the marketplace were those people who absolutely had to sell. And they have only one other way to attract a sale, which is to reduce their price. So yeah, the length of time is key. I do believe the government will kind of get this on, keep things moving on, and recognise that that's what needs to be done. Going on to the question of this cash purchase, I'm slightly hesitant. If it was my money, I'd be dragging my feet, personally.
Why is that, Simon?
Because of the aforementioned lockdown. If the lockdown drags on longer, and I've just completed with cash, I've no idea of this other person's circumstances, but let's assume that this is most of their disposable income that they're about to put into a deal. If the lockdown is short and sharp and we go back and the market has a small dip, perhaps that's okay, and moving on is all right. If it lingers and goes on any longer, which maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, I think personally I'd be parking my cash still, dragging my feet, waiting to see how the market comes out the other side, and if it hasn't moved too much, continue with the purchase. And if it looks like it's still continuing to go down, I think it's time potentially to have an honesty conversation with the vendor about how the market has changed, regretfully, due to unforeseen circumstances, and in order to continue, or properties that were higher priced compared to this particular one pre-lockdown are now in range again, and potentially offer maybe slightly more attractive proposition, unless the price was perhaps revisited on this purchase, which is a really horrible thing to have to do on a sale. It's one of the I've known many investors do this in the past. You take a purchase all the way right up to the point of completion, and then you go, no, I'm going to drop the price, when you realize what the other person's circumstances are. It's the worst thing in the world. Yeah, gazumping in reverse. It should almost be banned, really. As professional investors, we shouldn't be doing that. But in this kind of circumstance, maybe, well, I would personally, I'd be going, I'm really sorry, things have changed. I don't want to mess you about. However, if the market has changed by as much as it could do, then perhaps we need to revisit that purchase price. Yeah.
And let's move on to Tim, because that leads nicely, doesn't it, in terms of the conveyance process. Are you indeed seeing a lot of this price dropping? And in terms of the price points of property, what do you think is going to happen because of COVID-19?
Okay, there's the two issues there. Firstly is, yes, undoubtedly, prices. Some people are trying to drop prices. A commercial one today just came up. I know they were going to take a lease of a shop, and they were going to get, I think, a 3-month rental free period. They've just negotiated a 5-month, and they're completing on that basis. So there is clear evidence that some people will drop prices. Conveyancing can continue. Obviously, if government guidelines are pretty clear. If properties are not empty, you shouldn't be moving in. If they are, you can. So there are some available. My concern, however, is long term. You'd expect me to say as a solicitor, because solicitors never give you a simple answer, never a yes or no. But I'm nervous about what's going to happen. Every recession is different, and this is, in a sense, a recession, but a massive recession. I tend to look at predictions of world and a big picture rather than just today or tomorrow. So I was reading some stuff in America. They reckon unemployment will go from 4% to 9%, and will take at least until 2023 to come back to 4%. Current estimates are that we won't get back to any sort of stable economy till at least the 4th quarter. Now that's 6 months off. Furthermore, my other concern is the idea of, yes, we'll have a lockdown, then it'll be all right. Well, I don't think there's any evidence of that at all. Basically, what will happen, I think, is the government will have to reduce the lockdown, but then what will happen, the infection rates will go up. Until everyone's got it or has died, infection rates will continue to rise. So I think we're going to see a series of changes, and where you have partial lockdowns. I think gradually they'll get better at it, whereby certain people will be allowed, if they've been tested, to go ahead. But that creates massive uncertainty. So I think there will be bargains if you can find a bargain, but I would be nervous. And there are a lot of businesses who are going to fail. There is going to be a lot of debt. There are going to be people who are made unemployed. And I don't think any of us have got the faintest idea what's going to happen. As I said, every recession is different, and this is completely unknown. It's virgin territory. And therefore, I think anybody who's making rash decisions ought to be careful. I think lastly, if you are making a deal, make sure you've got plenty of headroom. Make sure you're not making it tight. Make sure you've got cash reserves, because you don't know what's going to happen around the corner. So if you can afford it and it's a bargain, it's long term, okay. If it's short term, you're short of cash, don't do it.
Tim, just sticking with that for a second, if you don't mind, because one of the questions I was just sort of coming through was talk about trades, people going to a property. Now we talk about lockdown, and it's connected to a property purchase, because if you've got to buy a property, one of the questions was convert it to a HMO. But if we're in lockdown, surely that means tradespeople are not allowed on a property. Are there issues with that from your perspective, Tim?
Yeah, to be honest, I've got the government guidance now. I'm just trying to find the right bit. Certainly, they are giving guidance. The latest is dated April the 26th. And that was quite clear that some things can happen. So, for example, removers can go ahead. And they say it quite clear. Removers should honour their existing commitments, where it's clear the move can be done safely for the client and your own staff, and it's clear the moving date cannot be moved. And then it says removers should follow the latest government guidance, which says that work can carry out in people's homes, provided the tradesperson is well and has no symptoms or coronavirus. So I think you need to check the regulations for your particular circumstances. Clearly, some work can carry on. My SA, for example, has still got some contractors booked for the next couple of weeks, which is fine. So some things are going ahead, but I think a lot of things aren't. And the government guidelines are fairly clear that if it's not essential, they don't think you should do it. But you've got to stick with the guidelines about keeping safe, keeping away from people with coronavirus, and keeping distance.
Yeah, I mean, just only one thing I'm going to add to it, all the points, valid points have been made today so far, is don't put your wealth in front of your health. So if you've got a property and you're living at a property, now you've got all these tradespeople, even though they're fit and well now, you don't know what's behind the scenes if they've been ill and they're not aware of it. So don't always put your financials in front of your health, put your health first, and then make your financial decisions. I certainly echo the points of making sure that people use their logic, but also just think about your own family and you know, meeting joint venture partners to talk about deals, or meeting a estate agent and letting agent. You're potentially putting yourself in more risk as you do this. And if you've seen then tradespeople as well, you know, that's just exacerbating the issue. So just be a bit more careful in regards to that. I don't know, Tim, do you have an office? Because one of the questions I've got is a bit of a leading question I've just made there. But we're talking about business rates, which is slightly different from what the conversation has been so far tonight. Is people are saying, well, I have a service accommodation. Can I get the business rates grant from my local authority? And I'll open it to you, Tim, but then I'll kind of open it to everyone else. What's your thoughts on that?
I don't know, to be honest. I'll happily pass that to someone with more knowledge in that particular subject. I'll own up. I don't know.
Okay. Anyone else want to just kind of jump in on that one? Go on, Paul. I can see your hand up there. Oh, Paul's on mute. Let me just unmute. Let me just see if I can do it.
It's all right. Sorry. Yes, as regards business rates, a couple of things there. One is if that's the only property you've got on the business rates, you're going to qualify as a small business owner, and therefore you're unlikely to pay rates. Secondly, you can only claim business rates if you've got planning for a service accommodation unit. So it's no use if you've only got C3 applying for business rates, because they'll say, no, it's a house, residential, sorry, go away. So I think that should cover that. Can I just go back on that person who's after the small HMO? In my experience, small HMOs don't really work, because if you lose a room, that's your profit and it's eating into your expenses. So I would just be ultra. People do like minimos, as they call them, and 4 is usually the smallest, but I think from my personal experience, I prefer 5 or 6, A, because they come under, you don't need planning permission unless it's an Article 4 area, and B, you've got headroom. If you're one room down, then you've got a headroom and you can survive. Whereas on a 3-bed HMO, I'd have thought that if you've only got one, and who's going to be your tenants in the forthcoming future, you're going to struggle. So are the returns going to be there? You've got to assume you're going to have a void. We all like to think we don't, but please, factor that in. So I hope that helps on both.
Yes, it does. Thank you ever so much for that. And Paul, one thing I did notice was Bron was doing an awful lot of twitching as you was having that conversation. I don't know if that was relating to the HMO 3 rooms or whether that's to do with business rates. So Bronwyn, can you step in onto this one?
Yeah, well spotted. I was going back over the question and thinking, so if you are on small business rate relief, then it's not applicable to you because you're not paying it anyway. If you're on business rates, then you will get the relief. I think the question was, how do you apply for it? I think in our case, we've been told that we'll just have 0 on our bill for the next quarter. So I don't think you have to apply for it, but I'm not 100% sure on that one.
I think just onto that point, because I've done a lot of work with the local authority, and the key thing is it depends on how much rates you pay. I know there is the small grant, or I think it's £10,000. Just check my website now, which has got all the information up to date. So there is a £10,000 grant where you've got business rateable value of £50,000 or less, so 15,000 or less. You get this 10,000 grant. You can also get a £25,000 government grant for your business rates if you've got a rateable value between 15,000 and 51,000. Just on that point, one thing I was very clear about was this is for retail and hospitality. And Paul's already said it, so I'm not going to repeat this, but it's more to do with your classification of usage. So a lot of people will have service accommodation holiday lets, but not change the usage, and therefore have normal council tax as opposed to business rates. And you can't get this grant for just normal standard council tax. You have to be business rates to get this grant. So people who haven't changed their use class won't get this at all, unfortunately. Okay, so just to go to other questions that's come through, it's very similar to terms of arrears now. Tim, from your perspective, obviously we talked about, and I'll open it up after Tim this is, but in terms of what people should be doing about rental arrears, you know, there's got to be a conversation surely to be had with tenants rather than going straight through a legal route.
I would have thought so. I think there's going to be I don't think anybody's got a simple solution to this one, because the problem is, if at the moment with the government saying you can't evict them for 3 months, there are going to be some people who are simply either can't pay or won't pay, and they'll take advantage. It's quite difficult to see how that's going to be resolved in the short term. In the medium term, clearly you're talking about debts probably worth of more than £1,000, £2,000 plus. That obviously is going to be small claims court, and so I can just see that the small claims court being overwhelmed. But the real problem with litigation is you can only sue someone if they've got any money. And the danger is some of these people may not have money. You may be all right, you may have got guarantees from parents, etc. But if people haven't got any cash, you can sue them all you want to, you're not going to get it. So this is a problem. There's no simple answer. But I think, yes, the first thing to do is always have a chat with someone, see if you can come to a reasonable arrangement of whatever sort that suits you both. But if not, then I think the option will be a small claims, unless the government changes their mind. But again, that's going to be linked to delayed eviction. So it's going to be very difficult. There are going to be tens of thousands of people who are going to be very unhappy, and the court's going to be overwhelmed, I'm afraid. They're struggling to keep up as it is.
Just Simon, just on that point, obviously, as soon as you mentioned earlier about making sure that you keep up to your payments as much as possible, because it is a payment holiday. Ultimately, if someone has got a crippling situation whereby hardly, and someone's just commented actually that 75% of their tenants aren't paying now. If someone's in that position, surely they ought to, from a cash flow and staying afloat, go to their banks and speak to them about this payment holiday. If that was the case, what is this payment holiday? What happens to that money? What interest is applied? Will it affect someone's credit rating?
Oh, that is a really great question. So in terms of the mortgage payment holiday, the amount of a holiday that you apply for, so at the moment, lenders are asking how much holiday you think you're going to need. So I guess if up to 3 months is available, you're going to ask for 3 months. Now that money on a monthly basis that you're not paying is added to the current balance of your mortgage. Let's say you have a £100,000 mortgage and your monthly mortgage payment is a horrendous interest rate of £500 a month. Okay, yeah. So next month, your mortgage balance is 100,500. Yeah, the following month it's 101,000, and the following month it's 101,500. So it's gone up by £1,500. Because you had a payment holiday, that your mortgage payment, or it's unclear exactly how the mortgage lenders will calculate it, but it is thought that they will calculate it from there onwards when the holiday ends on the new balance. Yeah, and you carry on paying, so your 4th month's mortgage payment is now calculated at the high interest rate, or the interest rate you had, but now on not on the 100,000 but on 101,500. And effectively that's within financial circles, that's known as compounding, but in reverse. So it's the worst kind of interest loading you could do. Now it's relatively low interest rates and it's a relatively small balance, so I would suggest if you have done that, it would be wise, if you can, to repay that balance back down to remove that compounding effect. That's a whole other subject though, in terms of should you have interest only, should you have repayment, and how should you start repaying more. Anyway, yeah, we won't get, that's another time. Yeah. So there's that. Will it affect your credit rating? The lenders and the government have said it shouldn't affect your credit rating, and lenders that have signed up to the mortgage payment holiday scheme or offering it, because it's not really a scheme that's being offered, state that your credit file will not show as a late payment. They've not all stipulated whether you will show as a payment in this month or whether it will be just a U, which is unspecified, which is quite interesting, isn't it? Because the two are very different. Yeah. Now most lenders should put a 1 in there that you have paid it, you've just taken a holiday. And that's how the traditional and technical mortgage holiday should work. But again, these systems haven't been tested. Okay, and a lot of these lenders are offering payment holidays, being forced to offer payment holidays, and they've never done it before, ever. So they're having to implement a whole new system. and roll it out to workers who aren't operating in an office. They're operating remotely at home. So there's lots of scope for things going wrong, in my opinion. So there could be the possibility of a late payment accidentally going on your credit file, which is massively difficult to get turned around, even though they all say it isn't. Trust me, it is. And if you imagine if it's happening on any kind of scale, you've got thousands of other people all queuing up to try and get that problem resolved. The other thing that hasn't been discussed yet, and I'm waiting to, and I've asked this question, I'm waiting to hear back, is, I say I'm waiting to hear back. The reason I'm waiting to hear back is because this has happened with one underwriter. The underwriter has come back and asked, this is on a property that is very near to complete, have any of the tenants that are in the property, it's an HMO, asked for a mortgage payment holiday? Because technically, under the Prudential Regulation Authority, they're meant to check that there's enough rent coming in to service the mortgage. If you've got an HMO and you've got 5 rooms and 3 people aren't paying, you've just failed your rental stress test. And it's not clear yet how that's going to get resolved. And also, if in the future, when you come to apply for a new mortgage and they're doing you're a portfolio landlord, you've got more than 4 properties, and they're stress testing the rest of your portfolio, and they're checking what rent comes in, do they now take into effect that you've had tenants who've decided not to pay or couldn't pay? There's no real answer yet. Watch this space, and I think really that if anyone who's listening today, please do come back for our next session at the beginning of May, because I'd really love to, because we will really know. I will really know exactly where we're at, and all of us in all our respective sectors. Simon for tax, Tim, etc. You're going to be reporting how the market's going and offers, etc. Bronwyn, I'm sure, in terms of deals, etc. Yeah, fascinating. Absolutely, not a nice fascination, I'll add. Yeah. But nonetheless,
I think on that point, Simon,
yeah,
if people are starting to ask for mortgage holidays, and it does indeed trigger this whole credit rating issue, whereby it looks as though you've made a default, technically speaking, we could all be in harm's way, because we're thinking, well, the government's told us to take a payment holiday because our tenants aren't paying. I'm financially crippled this side, but now I can scupper my business for the long term, never mind the short term.
Yeah. So the lenders certainly shouldn't be marking this down as default or late payment. What they should be marking it down as payment continued.
Okay. It'd be interesting. I think that's the thing on that.
There is definitely scope and element for human error and or system error, for that to creep in. For what can be a temporary wrong entry, which then needs to be rectified. And from my perspective, it's always easier not to let the problem happen rather than try and correct the problem because you didn't manage it in the first place. Yeah,
it's interesting. So someone called Mike is on YouTube just saying, regardless of that credit rating and its payment holiday, if you want to remortgage the property and have that loan to value being there, would that cause issues because you've asked for payments and now you go for almost an instant reevaluation?
That's the other thing. Yeah, if you've just taken out a 75% loan to value mortgage, you've taken, and a lot of lenders are very hesitant to give mortgage holidays for new completions for obvious reasons. You're then adding the balance, so your loan to value has then gone up because you're adding the balance of the non-payments, and potentially the property market dips. Remortgages will start to look at perhaps a little challenge. If the lockdown's really quick and not as severe as we think, then I think those higher loan to value mortgage products are going to come back without too much of a challenge. But it's a worry. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of echo what everyone else is saying, the uncertainty, what decisions should you make, etc. I mean, personally, I'm hankering down, I'm keeping my cash reserves, I'm keeping something back for those opportunities that people keep saying. if you don't mind, Jenny, I'm going to bring you in now, so if you can unmute yourself. The question is in regards to this whole payment holiday, people thinking, well, is this a payment holiday, or can I pay a bit of my rent and then, you know, double down on other months? That's a question that's come on YouTube. What's your advice when dealing with tenants, first of all, when you know they're going to have financial issues, and in terms of how much to pay each month going forwards?
Right. So there was some article today in the Residential Landlords Association press release saying that tenants should pay their rent. They shouldn't treat this as a green light to take 3 months rent holiday, and rent payments stand. As has been said, every case is different. You need to be having conversations with your tenants. We sent out a circular to all of our tenants right at the beginning of lockdown when we knew all this was just starting off, and asked them to contact us if they had any problems. Now, we're just at 6th of the month, so nearly all of our rents come at the beginning of the month. We've managed to get all bar 4 rents in this month, which is much better than I expected. The people we've had conversations with, they've told me why. They've either been furloughed, or they're self-employed and they have no work because they have to stay in, and they've given me their reasons why, and they've offered something towards their rent. We have only one person across the whole of the portfolio and those that I manage that has paid nothing, and he said, I've got no work, I can't pay you this month or next. Now, I've managed to talk most people around to paying us something. The majority of people this month have got the money to pay their rent. I think it's going to be a different story next month, because people will be getting perhaps at best 80% of their income. And what I've found from the tenants I've spoken to is that although there is a safety net from the government with the universal credit stepping in, it's totally overwhelmed, and that process isn't fast enough to get rent payments in for the current month. People are really looking sort of 3 or 4 weeks down the line even to get their telephone appointment. So I believe next month will be worse. I believe we have to give, morally, compassionately, if people can't pay, they need to put food on their tables first. Landlords obviously need to have some money. So I need to try and get people to pay what they can, not just say, I'm not paying anything because the government said I don't have to. And it is a case by case conversation to have. Now, when we have had the conversations, obviously we don't know how long this is going to last for, but when we get back to some semblance of normality, we're going to be putting a payment plan in place that is agreed in writing between us and the tenant, so that we can start to recover that income for the landlord. And people need to stick to that. As long as they stick to those arrangements, there will be no legal action taken. There'll be no evictions. We won't be looking for any of that. We want people to stay. Most of the tenants are jolly good tenants. They're looking after the homes. They're living in a way that you want your tenants to, and we want to help them stay in the properties, because actually, if they move, it's quite difficult to fill again at the moment. So you've got to give and take with all of that. But I have found, particularly this month, that most people are doing the right thing. And yes, it will be more difficult the longer this goes on.
Very, very, very close. We're coming to a close now. So what I'm going to do for this session is just do a whip round to people to drop in their closing comments. Obviously, Jenny, you just had a say there. So what closing comments from this session have you got for the viewers tonight?
Well, I think everybody needs to stay fairly positive. I think we've got to be careful with our money, but we need the money to be going around. We need to keep the economy stimulated. So everybody needs to pay a little bit, and then the money goes around, and then we don't stall so badly. So pay what you can.
Great. Bronwyn, over to yourself and Muji as well.
Yeah, so I think my focus here is think about your own situation and plan for a long period of time. You know, you've got to plan for the worst case, and then it can only be better than that. And the other thing is to communicate. So that's what, again, whatever your personal situation is, start talking to people, start finding out what you can and can't do, and you know, start thinking positively about what you can do that feels like you're making progress. Because I think the worst thing is when people go, I don't know what to do, I'm in paralysis. You know, that's what we're all here for. Just pick the phone up, start to have those conversations, and you'll be amazed at how helpful that is. You know, so I'm happy, I'm here, please contact me.
Great, thank you, Bronwyn. Mr. Hilliard, over to you.
Thanks, Simon. Two things I think I'd emphasise is, one is, as you said earlier, health before wealth. Your health and your tenants' health is far more important than wealth. So please do try and accommodate tenants where it's a genuine reason for non-payment. And secondly, look at your own expenses. Cut back on all, you know, we've all got, well, I'm assuming we've all got gym memberships that have been cancelled or deferred. So save whatever you can. Just go through all your expenditure and go, do you need that? Terminate it. So make sure that you're hunkering down to, you know, could be 3 months, could be 6 months. You know, I think if you budget for 6 month issues, then you're at least erring on the better side of things. And yeah, fingers crossed, it should only be a month or two, but yeah, look on the worst. So
good stuff. Over to you, Simon.
Yeah, I think really it's a time for just gently pausing within the market space, take a breathe, see where we're going to come back out, working out whether this is going to be a shorter term thing or whether it is indeed going to go slightly longer, to work out whether they're going to be those aftershocks. So there are, as Tim was kind of sharing with us, the potential for partial lockdowns for certain sectors of the population moving forward. And also travel. I guess travel between countries is going to remain very restricted whilst we contain the virus. So book your UK holiday fairly soon.
Indeed. Over to you finally, Tim.
Yeah, I think number one, this is virgin territory. Nobody knows what's going on. Anybody who says they definitely know what's going on, frankly, that is guessing. But I think there are a few things we can take out of it. Number one, in reality, although not actually, we're in recession. And having been through a recession and run a business, number one with a recession is survival. Make sure you survive. Make sure you hang on to your cash. Cash is always king in a recession. But equally, don't give up. Make sure you've got a plan in place so when the market does pick up in your particular sector, and I don't think it'll be the same sector at the same time, it'll be different stages, make sure you're in a really strong position to make up for it, because most people are going to come out of this with debt and having lost money. So they're going to have to make sure they make up for it coming out. But some businesses will go. Make sure yours survives and take advantages of those businesses who go by actually expanding when things get better.
Great stuff. Listen, guys, thank you ever so much for the expert panel that have been contributing so valuable to listeners tonight. I just want to say a special thank you to Bronwyn, who thought of this idea and putting people together so quickly as she did, for a conversation that we had last week to right now, we're obviously hosting this event. As Simon alluded to, we will be coming back to this session on the first Monday of every month at 7 p.m. So obviously it will be a bank holiday May, but we'll have plenty of updates for you in regards to not just coronavirus and all that stuff, but there will be obviously information that's coming at us from banking, where the property market is going in the future as well. So hopefully we'll have a better steer of where we're heading post coronavirus, if we are going to see that right now. Make sure you do stay tuned. Give this whole session a thumbs up if you found it useful. That does help the YouTube algorithm to find this, to share this content with everyone else that was not able to attend. If you've got a network, share that URL for the YouTube. And make sure that you are with us next month. We will be sending invites. Check out the social media for all the expert panels as we invite you to the next session. Until then, thank you ever so much. My name is Simon, and we'll see you again next month. Bye-bye. Okay, we're done.